What's going on, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Stereo Therapy. I'm your host, Lisa, and you know I've got my lovely co-host, Justine, right there with me. If you're new here, this is the show that showcases the importance of music and mental health. We invite guests on to share their own story of how music has made a positive impact in their lives and their own mental health journey. Before we get into our guest, you know we have a little business to take care of. We do it every show. I feel every podcast does it, so here we go. If you're enjoying the show, remember to follow us or subscribe on any platform you're currently listening to this right now. It really would just help our show out. We appreciate it so much. As well, leave a positive rating or review. It would really mean a lot to us and let Justine and I know what are we doing right, what are we doing wrong, what can we improve on, all that good stuff. Thank you so much to everyone that's already done that. A lot of you have. We cannot thank you enough for that. But if you clicked on this, you know, today on the show, we were joined by someone you've probably seen on your reels on Instagram or on TikTok with some amazing content. We sat down with Matt Vettese. We absolutely loved meeting Matt and hearing how his musical journey started, how he deals with mental health as a content creator, his amazing podcast, Ourspace, which I just love so much and listen to weekly, the scene today and back then, and how he found comfort in the band Metallica. Absolutely loved chatting with Matt and cannot thank him enough for coming on our podcast. We want you to meet Matt. I know you want to. You clicked on this. So here's our conversation with Matt Vettese. I know, I mean, obviously listening to our podcast where music and mental health, I kind of want to go back to those younger days of you and the memories of falling in love with music. With the first, whether it's you were a teenager, little, where was that? At what point? What did you hear that was like grabbed you?
So the first thing that really it's always like weird telling this story, right? Because I don't know what band to go with and what point I think it really clicked. Because I think if we want to go with the very first where I wasn't really sure that it clicked, it was actually Avril Lavigne. I think I was like 11
Mhm.
years old, 12 years old, kind of that like, early days of going through puberty and, her first album, Skater Boy and Complicated and all those. I remember really liking her music and I just had the biggest crush on her, right? But
Oh,
I,
yeah.
I don't think that really like connected with me or clicked with me that it was connecting in the way that it was. And because I always sort of felt like I don't want to say the word normal because normal isn't the right word. I feel like none of us are normal. Like normal,
Mhm.
there's no such thing as normal.
Yeah.
But like I always felt different or that I couldn't connect with let's call them the normal kids in school, right? So I think when I finally grabbed Metallica's Black Album, I heard some other kids in school that also kind of felt like they were more on like the reject end of things. And once again, these aren't nice words, but they're just sort
Yeah.
of the way to put some context into it. And they were talking about this band Metallica, and I never heard about Metallica, but I all I knew was that they were this rock band, and I knew that I liked AC/DC from my dad's collection of music. And so I went to the store and I just saw Metallica, picked up the Black Album. It was the only album that they had in stock that day. Threw that CD into my Discman, and Sad But True came on, and I was like, "What is this?" Right? And then the
Mhm.
album just kept on going and going and going, and it felt like, "Oh, okay, cool. This album is really connecting with me on every single note." Feeling like an outcast, feeling like you're being judged for whatever reason, and it hit all of those notes for me. So that was really like that first entry into heavier music, and then my taste buds sort of evolved into a whole bunch of different things from metal to punk to emo. But like that was, I think, the starting point, like the point where it really clicked with me. It was actually Metallica's Black Album.
Wow, no one has said that yet, and I'm excited to hear that because I think even growing up too, Metallica was such a listening force in my household. My parents, it was Metallica. Everything, and it's like I remember just hearing them and being like, "What is this too?" Like at a young age, and now being, gosh, like 38, thinking like Metallica is still here. They're still touring. They're still, I mean, whether there's younger generations coming from their parents. So it's just they're a band that I have yet to see. I don't think I've ever been able, whether it's a festival or whatever, and they're on a bucket list, just to have that moment of, okay, when I was little, I heard Metallica and they made that impact, but I've never seen them.
You need to go and see them. Honestly, that was my first, I think, concert that I went to willingly, where I like begged and begged my parents to let me go, and my uncle had taken me because he was a fan of them as well. So that was my when people say your first concert, like technically it's the Backstreet Boys because my parents took me to see the Backstreet Boys when I was a little
Yeah.
kid.
Justine.
You
Yeah,
know.
you love Backstreet Boys, Justine.
Yeah, I know.
But when I was about 13, I had begged my parents to let me go, and so they bought me tickets, and me and my uncle we went. And it was their Saint Anger tour. It was like Angry at the World, they called it, Angry at the World tour, and that moment was like life changing for me too, right? Because once again, like I felt like nobody really understood me, but I had this CD and this band that really did. So getting to see them live, like that really helped me. Even I remember through some certain points of being an early teen or tween where, things were feeling tough for me mentally, but like I knew like I got to go to this Metallica concert that's in a few months. So it's like, like just get through these next few months and you get to see Metallica live. And that was very much like a thing I think that like they really did help with my mental health at that age where you're starting to like you don't necessarily know or realize what's going on, but you know that something's not feeling entirely right. So they were like that first really like that they were that first comfort band for me.
And that's so I was just talking to my friend when we were doing the Newfound Glory episode, and they're always my comfort band. And I think that even moving here, when I moved from the Chicago area to New Jersey, that was a big leap. And I was like, oh, everybody's different here. But the comfort band for me was Newfound Glory. So when they went on I'll tell this story in the episode, but like when we went on and I saw them come across the stage and it was just like, okay, like everything's okay. I'm seeing my comfort band. I'm here. And although I felt really alone here in New Jersey, I didn't have a place. I left all my friends and family, but I had that comfort. And I think so many people are going to relate to that so much because we all have that comfort band.
The funny thing is you mentioned You Found Glory. I'm gonna guess based off of your podcast and the things that I've seen from you, you still love You Found Glory,
Oh
still
my
listen
God.
to them, all of that. The funny thing is I don't remember the last time I listened to Metallica.
Oh,
So
yeah, I'm
that's what's
yeah.
weird. I don't have any of their records on vinyl. Like I don't remember the last time that I listened to them. They were really my comfort band until I think and they really helped. They were like my gateway band as well, and they helped me explore those years. And I'm really appreciative for the things that they did for me throughout those years. But then my music taste sort of evolved, and I got more into Nirvana. And so you'll
Hmm.
actually be able to see, like, I've got Bleach right here. Like I've got a
Yeah.
Nirvana tattoo. It was my first tattoo, and Nirvana sort of became that comfort band for me throughout my high school years, right? Because Metallica was almost that gateway and that entry level, like grade 7 and 8. I guess you're American, so you'd call it middle school. It was still
Yeah.
elementary school for us. But then the ninth grade, when we hit high school, Nirvana really took over, and it was like Kurt Cobain everything and Nirvana everything, and it's still my one of my favorite bands.
Mhm.
I've got the tattoo. I've got the In Utero Angel on my calf, and like they're I also credit them towards the gateway towards a lot more of the emo stuff and the punkier stuff because they have more of that punky sound. And that's what I ended up identifying with so much more. But I needed Metallica to find Nirvana, and I needed Nirvana to find the Used, and I needed the
Mhm.
Used to find Chiodos, and I needed
Yes.
Chiodos to find, and it's just sort of like all of those gateways into everything. And now I'm kind of like, there's this big umbrella, and I that's why I like the term as cringy as it is, elder emo, because I think elder emo isn't a genre of music, it's a person. And elder emos, they like Nirvana, and they like Taking Back Sunday, and they like Metallica, and they like Bullet for My Valentine, and they like all these different genres. So it's like, yeah, the word emo is in elder emo, but elder emos listen to post-hardcore and metalcore and pop punk and all of that. So I feel like it's a good umbrella to put everything in instead of having to specify. If you want to have a conversation like, oh, we're having a post-hardcore conversation, so I can't talk about Blink 182 here, but
Mhm.
Blink 182 may have just been as influential as a band like Alexis on Fire to a lot of us, right?
Mhm. No, I mean, that's 100%. Like, that's Nirvana was that gateway for me when I remember seeing that candlelight vigil of Kurt Cobain on MTV when I was little. And it was like I had that moment of why or how do these people how are they mourning him? They didn't know him. They didn't, what is it? And I sort of was like, oh, I'm gonna go to my parents' CD collection and their vinyl collection. Like, what is it? And found Nirvana. And because of Nirvana, it led me down this path of how I found bands and researched bands, like, oh, I got to get to know them. And again, like Nirvana, I know Justine, you're one and the same because it led us down all those paths. And without finding Nirvana, I don't think I would be as into music today without discovering that and that sound, or especially like this path of music.
And Nirvana wasn't just, I will throw out a hot take here. I don't think any band has had an impact on music like Nirvana has
Hmm.
since Nirvana. I think that that was the last biggest wave that a band has really put on the music industry that had that big of an impact. I think other bands have had big impacts since then, but I don't think anyone's been as big as Nirvana and even as Kurt Cobain. But Kurt just had this great way of in his music and in his life, and it's just really sad and really weird to say this because he was a junkie, but at the same time, he had this way of presenting himself and his life and his music that really connected to just so many people, no matter who you were. If you felt like an outcast, you identified with Nirvana and what they were doing and what Kurt was doing, and I mean, I'm not going to make any assumptions, but with you, but I feel like as a woman too, that must have been, seeing the things that he was saying and doing and his songwriting, like that was
Yeah.
so important, and you saw how important it was for him in his life and in his music to call out the misogyny and homophobia
Yes.
and the things that it was the way that he lived his life, it was the way that he wrote his music. It was the way that he was so authentically himself, where he called out the bullshit way before it was cool to do so. Back when
Yeah.
you'd get your ass kicked for doing something like that, right? Like he's
Hmm.
taken the beatings for calling out the homophobia or or the misogyny and all of that, right? Because it was so authentically important to him. And I think that was so important for a lot of music fans and people seeing that. Sure, a lot of people might have seen that and it might have gone over their head or they might not have thought of anything like that. But even if it connected with just one person, which it did because it connected with me,
Right.
it sounds like
Yes.
it connected with you.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
it's made that impact and it has that ripple effect, right? So that's why I love Nirvana. And I could sit here and talk about Nirvana and
Oh,
Kurt all day long.
yeah. Oh my God. See, and that's the, I just saw like a TikTok this morning, or maybe it was an Instagram post or something. Somebody was talking about how Nirvana, gets shit on, or kids want to, nowadays is the thing to shit on them, and how impactful they truly were. And again, like, yeah, hearing Kurt before it was, I'm not saying the cool thing, but before just saying these things way before stopping shows when he would see a girl in the crowd get, heckled or grabbed a certain way. And it's like we see bands do that, but just I think about that time, like if I could just go back in time and experience a Nirvana show, I would that would be it. If there was any way to just have that moment and those lucky people that got to witness that, because it was just such a special time. And uh, again, I could talk Nirvana all day. I
Yeah.
love them so much. They're so important.
I would just absolutely empty my life savings to go back in time and see a Nirvana show.
Oh, 100%. I don't, Justine, I'll throw it to you, but because you're gonna get not Nirvana, but kind of in the era we're in now, and kind of we were talking about.
So I know when I first heard of like the resurgence of emo and the term elder emo, I got a little worried because I was thinking of how the younger kids are making it popular, but like in our day, it wasn't. It wasn't like the most like cool thing to do. But now that I see it, I see how important it is, not to just like me, but to so many other people, how special all these bands are now that they're coming back together. Why do you feel we all clung to this era so much?
I want to argue a little bit on the whole, like, it wasn't cool back then because a lot of the songs that we were listening to were on the radio and they were on,
Yeah.
MTV and Much Music. So like it wasn't cool, but it was popular, if that makes any sense. Like,
Yeah.
I think we just didn't realize it at the time because that music connected with the outcasts. So we still felt like we were outcasts, but there was like that spotlight within pop culture for the Outcast, which was really cool, really weird that it kind of worked out that way. But at the same time, I think that we just connected with it because the songs just felt really authentic. And I think that back then the internet was also very, very new. And we finally felt like, oh, we can connect with something, whether
Mhm.
it is these songs, whether it is other people that we're finding on MySpace, whether it's other people we're seeing at concerts, whether it's our random kids in the hallway at this big, scary new high school of thousands of people. I don't know if you guys went to a big high school or not. I went to a big high school because I
Yeah.
was in a pretty big community, lots of elementary schools kind of amalgamated into this one big high school. So it was scary to go from, maybe a class of 80 to 90 kids to, and that being our year, to like thousands in just our year, you know? And so not knowing a lot of these people from other schools, but seeing other people like, oh, hey, cool, like you like the same music as I do, or like, hey, let's bond over this. And it's like, oh, you like Blink 182? I like Blink 182. Have you heard of Chiodos yet? Here's
Mhm.
my Chiodos CD. And I would take it home and rip it into my computer, put it on my iPod, and bring it back the next day and listen to it and be like, dude, like, this is insane, right? And that we connected over the music. So I think there was just something very special about that era because of the era that technology was sort of at. Where now we're so hyper connected to everything, and kids are so hyper connected to everything, that it's like, does it feel as special as it did when we were back then? Or are we just old now and just kind of being like, it ain't like it used to be?
Yeah. Yeah, I find myself saying that like often where I'm
Yeah.
like at those shows and like it's just not, but it's like it's wow, even hearing like Chiodos, like I remember was it '06 or '05? I don't one of those it was either 2005 or 2006 because I was in Illinois and Michigan was so close. Chiodos had played a basement of somebody I just knew in the show community. They played a basement show, and to just
It's
look
amazing.
back and think, "Okay, I saw them there," and then they played this tiny theater in Wheaton, Illinois, which had no business, and I don't think they had any idea who Chiodos was and what to prepare for because it was the most insane thing I've seen. It had, like, no real bar, but it had, like, this tiny bar where kids were just, like, leapt over it, and, like, just thinking about that and that era of it and how I hope kids are still getting those experiences or some of these bands where they're like, I saw them in this tiny place and having those memories. And now like Chiodos is coming back. I think they're playing When We Were Young. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, they
Uh,
are. As one of
uh,
my one, I don't care what sort of conflictions there are for that one. I'm going to be there watching Chiodos. I don't care if My Chemical Romance is playing at the same time. I'm going
mhm.
to see Chiodos.
Oh, a that like that it's
Oh
just
yeah.
so many memories with that and like what they started too. Like when Chiodos was big, that kind of genre like just took off and it's just wild. I want to get to When We Were Young. I know you too, Justine. I'm not pulling the bullet yet. Like I'm not there yet because I'm like, oh, it's expensive. But I just feel like if I can and I have the opportunity, I definitely want to go just to experience these like Chiodos, some of these records that whether it's Hey Monday that are just coming back together, and maybe I would skip like a My Chem because you know what I've seen them and they're important, but there's so many cool records played at this one. I don't know. I might have to find a way.
I don't think that that would be a conflict that they would put up there, because I feel like both albums are just way too big to have those ones conflicting. I feel like My Chem might be playing though at the same time as maybe a newer band that's kind of popular. Like maybe that might be like a Mom Jeans
Hmm.
playing at the same time as My Chem, in which case I would still have a little bit of a conflict because I've only seen Mom Jeans once and I've seen My Chem so many times at their height that it's just like, do I want to go and see them, or do I want to go, I don't
Yeah.
like at that time. And people listening might think that I'm crazy for even thinking about Mom Jeans versus My Chem, but the thing is when you're actually there and in that moment, it's really weird because there's also going to be some bands where you just need to skip, not even to see another band. You just need to sit down and get some water and sit in the
Yeah.
shade for a minute. Like
Yeah.
I missed Pierce the Veil because I was like, by the time they went on at last year's, I was just so dehydrated and exhausted from the first half of the day that I'm like, oh, this is gonna suck skipping them, but at the same time, like, let's just go get some chicken nuggies and water
Yeah.
and sit in the shade for like 10 minutes.
I know sometimes you need that, like, even me at that Anthony Green show I went to is a it turned into this 3-hour thing, and even just standing, it was a standing room, it was a small room, standing there for 3 hours, I was dying after. I'm like, "I have just stood in one place, I had a good spot," and it was, like, obviously acoustic, so there was nothing crazy, but I was dead. I was like, "How" I did festivals for 3 days, you Warped Tours back in the day, you'd go to state. How would I even be handled, like, at a when we were young? How would I be able to do that? I'd have to
The
take a
thing
seat.
is, though, is you just get so excited and it's Vegas and the
Mhm.
sun's out and you're seeing band after band after band that, like, for me, I didn't want to take a break. It was like,
Yeah.
and every time I got
Mhm.
tired, I got hit with another wind, and I'm like, all right, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. I almost had to use the discipline to be like, okay, we haven't eaten in like 9 hours. Maybe it's time we go and take a little break and get some shade and take it easy for even 20 minutes. Maybe we'll see the second half of their set and you're kind of listening as you're sitting in the shade. You know, you take a day. It's hard to even explain to someone. You'll get it when you're there. And I
Mhm.
would highly recommend, if you had the time off, if you had the budget for it, it is a really cool experience. So I would definitely recommend going to do something like that. Like, I'm really happy that I managed to do that last year.
Oh, so that makes me so happy because it's so conflicting. Sometimes some people and everybody's experience is different, but some people are like, "Oh, it's not worth it." But again, I think it's one of those things, if I didn't do it and I see everybody's TikToks or whatever, I'm like, I should just went. Why am I
You
sitting
get
here
that
watching a
FOMO.
TikTok?" Yeah, I get that FOMO, and it's like even a d I don't think this band is playing it when we were young, but I know it's a band that's important to you, and I was really excited to find this out because it's a band that's important to me. I don't know about you, Justine, but we're gonna see. I hope so. And I was so excited to have someone on here to talk about them. But the Gaslight Anthem, you're a big fan of them. What about that band has made an impact or that you just gravitated towards with them?
Half of my tattoos are inspired by the Gaslight Anthem or
It's so
Brian Fallon.
cool. Oh,
Like,
yes.
I love, love,
Hmm.
love them. So, like, going through the, I guess, the trajectory of favorite bands like Metallica when I was in those early years, then Nirvana was really that big one, and no one really ever toppled Nirvana. The only
Hmm.
band that really came close was maybe like Tool. I went through a really heavy Tool phase, which we won't really get into. And you know, I know their fans have a bad reputation, and I never really got into that much. I just kind of like liked their music and was whatever. But then something clicked in the early 2010s when I heard the 59 sound for the first time, and I was like, "Who is this?"
Yeah.
You know. And then I went to same thing, CD store. I went to go and buy the record, ripped it onto my computer, put it on my iPod, and at the time, I was in a point in my life where I was really new to my career and I was moving across the country. It was like early 20s, moving across the country for the first time for my first on-air radio job. And all I brought with me was a suitcase and my iPod. And on my iPod, I recently ripped all of the Gaslight Anthems albums onto there. And that they really helped me through that like scary part of moving across the country on your own. And they just have this. Brian is my favorite songwriter because he has this way of using his lyrics to create that imagery. And it's almost like I heard someone say that the Gaslight Anthem is just nostalgia for moments that I've never actually lived.
Ooh.
And and I
I love that.
and that is just very true. I don't know, there's
Mhm.
something about the imagery of like the radio, and like I
Yeah.
was on the radio, and then like the classic cars, and my dad was a big classic car guy, and drive-in theater. Like, there's just so much in that imagery, and then like the emotions of the songs that like just I found that they really connected with me. And they're almost romantic in a way, as weird as that is to say. Like, I feel like the Gaslight Anthem's music is romantic, and so I have this romantic feeling and this nostalgia feeling when I listen to their music that just really hits in a way that I don't think many other artists have been able to do.
Mhm. I can agree with that. So, like, I there's something about them. I fell in love with them because I saw them, I think oh gosh, so now I'm gonna date myself and think about this. I think it was Rise Against Gaslight Anthem and Alkaline Trio. I want to say that was the tour. And I remember I'd heard of Gaslight Anthem, but again, it was like one or two songs. It was like, okay, they're good. But I fell in love with them once I saw them live. Like I guarantee if I tell anybody that maybe is listening to this or just never gave them a chance or fell off, you have to see them live because that it's just everything pieced together is just I love them so much. And I mean now being here in Jersey, it's like they play the Stone Pony Summer Stage all the time. So like I'm really excited that they're back at it and doing that.
I want to go to New Jersey to see one of those hometown shows so bad
Mhm.
just because. But like the thing is too is with the Gaslight Anthem is they also have released their albums like at the perfect time in my life, including like I've found their music at each stage of my life when that music really connected with me at that time. It was almost like them or the Brian's solo stuff. It
Mhm.
came out exactly when I needed to hear those songs, you know, like Get Hurt came out when my fiance and we ended up going back to long distance because once again we ended up moving across the country. We were both media people, so we've both been moving across the country throughout our entire careers, and that means that for a lot of that we had to do long distance on and off. So, you know, Get Hurt came out at a time where we were doing long distance. I was between radio jobs. I was working construction chipping concrete, like the worst job ever. I'm not a handy person,
Mhm.
you know. So it was like it was just a miserable time of my life with that. And then Get Hurt came out, and I remember telling my boss I had a doctor's appointment that day, so I can go to the local record store and pick up the CD the
Oh,
day
I
that it
love
came
that.
out. And I popped it into my thing, and it was just like I connected with every single song as it came out. Same thing with when Painkillers came out. I was once
Yes.
again, it was a new thing where I was doing long distance again. It was just we were in different places in each time, and there was a point of pain. There was a couple of lines in Painkillers that hit me harder than I think any other song has. Um, the one that stands out the most was from Rosemary, and this is like my mental health song. Keeping with the theme of mental health with your
Yeah.
podcast. But Rosemary, he says, "Everybody's hurt, and mine ain't the worst, but it's mine, and I'm feeling it now."
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
think that just really registered with me and hit really hard with me because it was like, yeah, there's always someone hurting worse than me. And but that's not a reason to write off my pain. Like I can sit in my pain and my pain is okay. And my mental health issues are, you know, because I think a lot of the times we've been there where we've told someone like I'm not feeling well or I'm not okay right now. And it's like, oh well, what's there to be sad about? You know, you've
Oh,
got a
yeah.
roof over your head
Yes.
and food in your belly. Like, why are you so upset? Why are you so sad? What's going on? Right. And so that kind of makes you feel like, oh, well, yeah, there are people that don't have a roof over their head, and there are people that are going hungry right now. And that really sucks. And I think that we should care about their situation 100%. And I may not be in that situation, but this is the heartbreak or the agony or the, you know, whatever I'm going through right now that doesn't make it any less valid because of that. And you're allowed to take care of yourself and feel those feelings and go through your emotions just because it's not the worst pain in the world. This is mine. I'm feeling it right now. Like this is it, right? And that just like really hit hard for me.
Oh, I just it's so such a weird like, not weird thing, I know that's not the right word, but I love that because when Get Hurt came out, I was doing long distance. I'm originally from, obviously, Illinois, and my fiancé was born and raised New Jersey. That's how I came out here, and we met through Instagram because of our tattoos. I know this is controversial now, but the band Brand New, and both loved them, and when Get Hurt came out, that was my comfort too, because I could feel that. And same with Painkillers. We went through that and then finally relocating here. But it was just hearing what they had to say and just Brian Fallon, the way I love his solo stuff. And I think it's really slept on. And I'm really glad I've gotten to see him play a couple solo shows to hear them live because it was just again, if no one's a fan of them, just give it a chance because it's so just raw and emotional, and I just love them. They're one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah,
Eh,
I actually got so depressed when they took that hiatus because what
Mhm.
happened was I had never seen them live, and then I was traveling all across the country, and because I'm Canadian, most bands don't really come to different parts of Canada. Like it's Toronto, maybe
Yeah.
Vancouver, if you're lucky, Montreal, right? And
Yeah.
so I wasn't living
Mhm.
anywhere near Toronto for like I'm from Toronto and I'm here now, but I wasn't living anywhere through there when I was moving around for my career. But, so I never had a chance to see Gaslight when they came through Toronto, even though you mentioned, yeah, I've seen Rise Against a million times, probably
Yeah.
a dozen. I've seen them in gymnasiums, like at community centers before, and within a year I saw them play arena shows. Like it was crazy, but I've never seen them play with Gaslight. So, anyways, Gaslight becomes my favorite band. Still haven't seen them. Get Hurt comes out. I buy tickets to go to their Get Hurt tour show. That same weekend ends up being the same weekend my cousin's getting married in
Oh.
South Carolina. And my mom goes, "We're going to South Carolina for your cousin's wedding. I'm paying for your ticket. Like, let's go." And I'm like, free vacation to South Carolina, go to my cousin's wedding or Gaslight Anthem, right? And so I'm like,
Yeah.
I guess I'll go catch Gaslight next time they come.
Oh, yeah.
There was no next time.
No, yeah, I was
At
gonna
least not
say
for a very long time.
right.
Then they break up or go on their hiatus, and I'm just devastated. I'm like, I'll never get a chance to see them. Brian goes
Oh.
solo. I saw Brian go solo, and I went to every single solo show that he came through Toronto with. So that was amazing, and I really got to make up for that. They did the 59 reunion tour, 59 Sound reunion tour. That was awesome because it was
Mhm.
just like bang, 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 like 2 hours of music, and they were incredible. And then once again disappeared, a few solo shows. I was like, I just want new Gaslight. When are they getting back together? What is
Mhm.
going on? And then when they finally announced they were reuniting, went to go see them in Buffalo. They killed it. They killed it
Mhm.
because they hadn't announced the Toronto show. I went to the Toronto show afterwards too, and I saw some people complaining about their performance on that tour. He was talking a lot and
Yes,
all
that's the
of
number
that.
one thing I hear with him is he talks a lot, but I like it. I don't know, maybe I'm different. I'm like, I love when he would talk a lot. Like, that was one of my favorite parts of that.
I loved when he talked on his solo shows because he's
Yeah.
a genuinely funny guy and he's
Yes.
friendly. So like I really like that. But I will say the Toronto show when he came last time, I kind of saw where the other side of it was. Like he and everybody that I talked to that was there, I don't know if he just had a few too many or what it was, but it was just like it was too much.
Mhm.
It felt like the band was getting antsy with him. He kept mentioning that he had to pee, so,
Oh.
like, like, I think he just had too much to drink before going on. It was an outdoor concert in Toronto in October, so, like, it wasn't exactly comfortable weather. It was just a culmination of things, so I'm really happy I got to see him kick ass at the Buffalo show. And I'm really excited to see the next time they come through Toronto because they're playing at a better venue and just a better scenario. Apparently, things have gotten a lot better. So I don't know. We'll see how that goes. I feel like it might have just been an off night for him. And, we're all human at the end of the
Yeah.
day. It might have been just an off night. And I'm willing to forgive him and go and see him again. And plus, they're playing with Joyce Manor and
Yeah.
Pink Shift. And like, it's
Mhm.
going to be a good tour.
Oh, I and, like, even in talking about a band that's in your neck of the woods, another reason when I was like, "Oh, yes, Matt's coming on," because when we did our 20-year episodes and I was like, "I gotta talk about Alexis on Fire," and Justine's like, "I never got into them," but I'm like, "They're so important," and then I'm like, "All right, we've got Matt coming on, we could talk," like, what do you think for anyone else listening too? Because I'm sure there was, like, nobody whenever I put up like, the picture, nobody chose that album as like, "Oh, I liked that record," or maybe like, "Oh, I know of them." What do you think about that band? And obviously them being, from Canada and I think just that, but what about Alexis on Fire for anyone that's on the fence about them? What's the importance of them?
Okay, so I'm a little bit with Justine on this one. Not
Yeah.
entirely. But
Here you
when
go.
they were sort of at their height, I wasn't the biggest fan of them.
Yeah.
It took me a little bit longer than everyone else to get into them. I will admit that. I don't know what it was about them. But also though I will, and I've admitted this in the past, it took me a little bit longer to get into I call it emo screaming or like
Mhm.
screamo or whatever, right? Because it's like you
Yeah.
have so many different types of screaming in music. Like the new metal scream is more of like aggressive chanting scream. And then there's like that screamo scream, And it took Chiodos for me to really open up. And that's why I put them as like an important band, because they were that
Yeah.
first band that someone said, oh, you don't like screaming in music? Besides, like, the Used, but the Used aren't really screamo. They just kind of screamed in some songs. And there was like a little taste of it, but they weren't really a screamo band. And when someone handed me a Chiodo CD, I fell in love with All's Well That Ends Well. And then that really, I think, softened me up to the fact of like, bands with that type of style and that type of scream. So that opened me up to it more. And around that time was also the time where I think Crisis has come out and Dallas
Mhm.
Green was doing a little bit more singing. And then I was like, oh, okay, I actually like this. And then I went backwards from there. So it was Crisis, and then I went into, Watch Out, and kind of throughout all of those albums. So it took me a little bit longer to get into them, but I also will acknowledge that they are a very important band, because they were also, and I don't know if it's a local thing, or if it was a worldwide thing, because we had MTV, but no one really watched MTV in Canada. It was
Mhm.
Much Music. That was
Yes,
like
oh, I
our
loved
version.
Much. Yeah.
Yeah, so like Alexis on Fire was always on Much Music. So they sort of, and they were always being played on the local radio stations, the local alternative radio stations. So they had that importance because they were really that first band, I think, that brought that heavier screaming post-hardcore sound to the radio and to TV, mainstream TV locally. So they had a lot of importance within the scene, especially here. Maybe you can attest to more of that with MTV and them
Oh.
being on MTV.
Oh, yeah, and even though, like, we had MTV, I don't know if my satellite we would just get Much Music a lot, so I would watch them both, and I actually, like, MTV, like, had that big, like, I think it was MTV2. That was, like, their alternative where I saw,
Hmm.
like, brand new videos or dashboard videos where it was, like, or the late night MTV2 shuffle, and it was just so important, and it's like, I think for me, Alexis on Fire, obviously brought me to Dallas Green, and I mean, I could talk City and Color and Dallas Green all day, and he's one of the kindest humans I've gotten to meet, like, at whether it was a Warped Tour or concert, and just adore him, and I think for me too, Alexis on Fire brought that idea of you can have those screaming vocals, and then you can have someone like Dallas come in, and that just combined where maybe you weren't a big fan of the screamo or any kind of heavy music, I guess, and then you had someone like Dallas to pull it in. I'm like, just listen to Crisis. If you didn't want to give it a chance, and then go back, and then like kind of like what you were saying, like find your way because this band is so important. And I think any young kid, just go back to them. They're so great. I love them.
Yeah, if you're on the fence about the emo scream, listen to Crisis and then go backwards. If not, starting from start to finish, like going back, all of their albums are perfect. Like
Yeah.
if you're into it, they've had that influence, I think, on the scene that allowed more bands to be like that and pave that way for a lot of them into the mainstream. So like I acknowledge their importance to the scene a lot more than I acknowledge their importance towards me personally.
Yeah.
They definitely are an important band, and I love them. I love them now, but yeah, I think that they had a huge impact on the scene for sort of paving that way for the heavier bands with more screaming into the mainstream.
Oh, and I know, Justine, I'm like, I gotta address these two bands because I finally have somebody here that is gonna get into these. Like, how many episodes we have? We're going on 50 or 51, and yet, no one yet. So I have to, but I'll go ahead, Justine. You can go ahead and we'll get into the content creation part.
So, what is the biggest misconception that you feel is out there when it comes to content creators?
Probably that we all make a lot of money.
Yeah.
No, like it's not that way. Maybe there are some. I mean, good for you if you are a content creator and you are making an absolute killing doing it. But like I'm doing it for the love of it and for the fun of it, and it's just I've always had that. It's always felt good to me connecting with other people on things like music, from back into the early MySpace days to now the fact that I'm doing this and connecting with people. Like that's the joy that I get out of it. If I can make a few bucks off of it, sure I will. I do put a lot of work and time and energy into it. So if those opportunities come, I am going to take them. But like by no means am I able to fully live off of it, or, be able to take glamorous vacations or things like that out of it. Maybe I'm just doing it wrong.
Yeah. No, I do think that is such a I thought immediately for a while too, when you would see some of these content creators, you have to think like, "Oh man, they must get paid per post or view or this and that." And then I think I forget who it was, but somebody had come out and or maybe it was Casey Carlson of Deadlands, and somebody had said, "Oh, you must be rich because of all of her views on everything she does and her one takes." But she was like, "No, guys, like I don't know what you want to think, but that's not the case. I still work, I still do this, that, and the other thing, but not rich. I don't make a lot of money off this. I'm just doing this for me, and whatever happens, happens."
I feel like with the economy too and the way things are, we all like to look at all of the things that other people have and just assume that they have way more than they actually do. And we don't I think because we're also all individually, I think collectively we can say this for the most part, if you're not a part of that 1%, collectively we're all kind of struggling through life and through things together, that it's easy to look at what other people are doing and being like, "Oh, look, they just got a new car. Like they must be doing really well." But it's like, they probably took out a loan, or they're trying to, they needed it, or, like different things, or maybe they're just bad with money.
Yeah.
But there's a million different reasons as to why people do things and the money they spend. It doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's rich, right? I'm,
Yeah,
I'm
no.
I'm guilty of it. I'm guilty of looking
Oh,
at other people and being like, how do they do that? How do they
yeah.
afford that? How do they, but they're doing the same thing that we're all doing. Like a lot of us are in the same boat. Some of us are a little bit better. Some of us are a little bit worse off. But for the most part, majority of us are kind of all in the same boat that way, right?
Oh, it is. I mean, and even talking about your content creation now, you have this awesome podcast. You have Ourspace. I'm like, let me make sure I
Thank
get
you.
that right. I'm like, I want to say MySpace, but it's not MySpace. It's um, but
That was the tagline I had
right.
when I came up with it. It's not my space, it's our space, because
Yes.
it's not for me, it's not for you, it's for all of us, and it's collectively. That was, the thinking behind it. Like it's our space. It's our space to talk about music and with artists and creators, and it's a safe space to talk about things that, are taboo or might be controversial, or anything really. Like it's become a safe space to talk about things like that, and just have those conversations and promote music and promote content creators and promote those things. So that was the thinking behind the podcast. So I love that you said it's not my space, it's our space.
Yeah, because it is, and that was one of the things that drew me to that, and I was so excited that you wanted to start it because one, I think with your content creation, you obviously have this platform and people that follow you already, but now they're being taken into this, and you've had a lot of cool guests, and we actually have one coming on that you had on, Costin. We're gonna have Jenna on,
Oh, I'm
and
so happy to hear that. I
yeah.
love them.
Oh my gosh. And I fell in love with them. One, listening to your podcast, but two, when I guess I had no idea, I almost missed this, that Bayside shared our podcast on their story. And somebody reached out to me that works for their record label and was like, "Hey, I've got this band, Costin. I would really like them on your show." This, and I was like, "Costin, oh, I've seen them. I saw them on Matt's on Our Space. I've seen them and they're so great." And I think that's what's cool is you're bringing a lot of whether it's a different creative. Oh gosh, I can't think of it. I can't think of his name, but I love him. He does all the digital, like the pictures. Oh my gosh, I can't think of his name. It's gonna bother me right now. But you had so many cool people on your show that I think that's just incredible to have that and use that
Is
for
the
you.
creator I had on my show?
Yes, I can't.
Was it Sewa? He
Maybe,
does a lot of band recommendations. He's the
maybe.
guy with the headphones that speaks into it like
Yes.
this.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Zach. Yeah,
Yes.
he's awesome.
Oh my gosh. And to give someone like that a platform, so it's music and creators. And I think it's really cool to have that. I guess, what are you most proud of about that with everything you've been putting out?
I am most proud of when someone comes to me and says, "I just found this awesome new band and they're my favorite now, and I found them because
Mhm.
of you." Like I
Yes.
think that's so cool because I think as like teenagers, we all kind of fell into that trap of like wanting to feel like something was exclusive or cool, or like gatekeeping things, or like, you only found out because, I like it. So you're pretending to like it because I like it. I don't know. I was a
Mhm.
snotty little teen
Oh, so
as
was
well.
I. Yep.
So, but like now I'm the exact opposite where I'm like, I think about music and the impact that it's had on me and my life and my mental health and all of these things. And I think, why gatekeep these things if this band or this song or this music can help someone through a dark time or a rough time, whatever, and can make an impact on their life? Why would I want to gatekeep something like that, right? So and my personal band that I love sharing with, and they're not really an unknown band, but they're not a big band by any means either, is Spanish Love Songs. I actually have one of their
Mhm.
records here. And I
Mhm.
love telling people about this band because this band had an impact on me throughout the early days of the pandemic. And I struggled in the early days of the pandemic. Like
Yeah.
March, April, May were really tough for me. Um, and I thought that was around the time that I found Brave Faces, Everyone. And that album, just like song after song after song, just hit, 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 hit. And I've listened to that album so many times that I want to talk about it and I want to go to their shows and I want to buy their merch because I know that when they finish up their tours, they're going home and working their day jobs,
Mhm.
and I feel like a band like that shouldn't need a day job. Like they're
Yeah.
making such good, impactful music that I don't want them to work a day job. I want everybody to know about them. You know why? It's a little bit selfish. It's because if I keep telling people about this band and more people keep finding this band and they like this band and they start buying their merch and buying their records and all of that, they get to be so big to the point where they don't stop making music. I
Mhm.
don't ever want a band like Spanish Love Songs to go on tour, finish up their tour and go, great. We just traveled across the country. We're exhausted. We got to go back to our job. And we only made $500 split between, 4 or 5 people. We've got $100 each. Like, was that worth a month of traveling and sleeping in a van and doing these things? And I'm only throwing these numbers out there. I don't know how much they actually make. I'm just throwing that because I
Yeah.
think that's like more of a reality for a lot of smaller bands as well.
Mm.
As you go on tour and you walk away without any money. If you pocketed some money, you're lucky, right? So it's like, I don't want these bands to be putting in this work and not being able to live off of it. So they're like, you know what? It's not worth our time. I'm just going to go back to my day job and screw making music. I never want a
Mhm.
band like that that's had that impact on me to call it quits because selfishly, I want more music out of them.
Mhm.
I want another album. I want another tour, you know?
Yeah, no, it's funny you bring up Spanish Love Songs because that was a band you were one of the people, whether it was, I remember hearing about them from someone else, but then seeing your reel or whatever it was, and I was like, "Oh, what is this band? I've never heard of them." So you're out there doing it, and I agree with you with that, is that's the big reason I wanted Kaylee Goldsworthy on here. I have loved her forever, and she on our podcast episode was talking about how when she went to Coachella, she had to take a bus home. You figure you play Coachella, whether you're big or small, and how she has to work her day job and how as an artist, you do have to juggle that. And I was just like, I need to get her on here. The same thing you were just saying is an artist like her that's so wonderful and so great and so talented. I don't want her to have to do that or struggle in any way. I want to get her out there. So if I can do that with a podcast episode, I mean, it took me a year because she's so busy, but I was so thankful to have her on because I'm like, if I can just push one more person to her Patreon and do that, then that's worth it 100%.
Yeah. I mean, artists got to eat too, So
Yeah.
it's nice to be able to spread the word.
What's been your favorite part about either content creating or our space with the community that you've created?
I think my favorite thing is like kind of goes back to what I just said in terms of like sharing those music recommendations. And with our space, it's really cool to talk to cool people.
Mhm.
Like it's cool to be having those conversations and getting the chance to talk to them about, you know, the things that they're doing or the things that they love. So I think that that's really cool. And that's like a rewarding part of it, right?
Oh, 100%. And I mean, I know you've already touched on, obviously, we got Gaslight Anthem, Metallica, Spanish love songs. In what ways, besides those bands, has music do you see whether it's yourself and another artist maybe you wanna share, or that you just see out there making an impact with mental health?
What artists do I see doing that?
Yeah.
Like right now, like current artists?
Yeah, current, anything, because I think it's interesting. Like we have our list and people, but I would love to know if there's anyone we're missing.
I think Hot Mulligan needs to be in the conversation right now.
Yes.
And I think Hot Mulligan are probably the biggest emo band out there right now for the younger generation. Like
Yeah.
they're almost like the Gen Z's version of My Chemical Romance, you know? Not in the same style, and theatrics and all, but I think in the importance. I think in 10 years, 10, 15 years, the people that are going to shows now that are in their early 20s are going to look back at Hot Mulligan the same way that we look back at the Used in My Chemical Romance. And they're going to be like, we went to these shows where they were basement shows or they were small venue shows. And now we're seeing them playing festivals in Vegas or whatever it takes the place of a festival like when we were young. And I think that that's also because for two reasons. One, every time Hot Mulligan releases a new song, it's their best song. Like
Yes.
they just get
Yeah.
better and better and better and better. Like they released a song this week, and I'm like, how are they going to possibly top the album that they just dropped? And when
Exact.
they
Yeah.
when they dropped Drink Milk and Run before that, I was like, how are they possibly going to drop? And they just keep getting better and better and better. So as long as that trajectory stays, like they really can't miss, right? So
No.
they're just continually getting better, and they're only going to get better. So I think that that will have the longevity factor. And then also they're writing about things that are just super relatable to more than just one generation as well, right? Like I'm a millennial, I'm in my 30s.
Yeah.
I can relate to the things that they're talking about and the themes of their song the same way that someone in their 20s could, and the same way that a high schooler could, probably the same way that some people in their 40s could. So all of these themes within their songs are relatable, and they're going to stay relatable for a very long time. Those kids are going to be able to relate to that when they're in their 40s still. So like that's how you kind of know when a band's going to stick around or not, is their longevity in the lyrics, and can anybody relate to their song whether they're in their 20s or 40s, right? So
Oh, I almost feel like that meme or like that song like on TikTok where it's like, "Am I too old to be here?" Like I felt like that way with Hot Mulligan at first, and I was like, I don't know, like I'm in my late 30s, but it's like you said, I can relate to them, and they were a band when I found them, so many other people were talking about them. And I was like, "Oh, I was always one of those people too. If it's pushed on me, I'm probably not gonna do it. I gotta find them on my own." I was like that with the Menzingers, and finally I gave in and like in love with them. Like, what was I waiting for? But Hot Mulligan, they're just one of those bands that it's like you said, you can really so many people can relate to them, and I just love where they're headed, and I just that's one band I have not seen yet, and they're on my bucket list too because I'm like, I need to see them. I love them so much,
they put
but
on
I
a
don't
killer show.
I've
Like
heard that.
killer.
Oh,
They're so good live.
yeah.
Them and Free Throw, I
Mhm.
think are like Free Throw is better live than they are on their albums. Like that's how good, like, it was always
Yeah.
like a compliment to bands. Like if you go see them live, like it was almost like how good are they live compared to their albums? Can they sound like their albums or whatever? Because especially back then there was, not as much going into the production of it all for processing and sound. But listening to Free Throw live, I'm like, I had goosebumps the entire time.
Mhm. Oh, I love that's one of those bands I recently discovered within the last year, and I'm like, this is so good. That and Youth Fountain. They're another band that I found, and I was like, even though I'm in my 30s, I'm sitting here with the young kids, loving it all and absorbing it. And I love that all these younger bands, like when people say there's no good music, yes, there is. There's plenty of good music out there. You just have to dig a little bit or listen to your friends because chances
I
are we've
would
heard them.
argue right now that emo music is just as good, if not better right now than it was when we were growing up.
Mhm.
I think there are so many amazing bands right now having such a big impact. But the thing is as you age, you look back at newer music and you just connect with the stuff that you listened to in high school, and you're like, oh, yeah, that was the best. And then, like, that's final, and there's no opening your mind to things. I think if you look at what bands are out there that are working hard and doing really well and connecting with fans and doing it in an authentic way, the scene's like hasn't been as good since the 2000s. Like bands like Free Throw and Hot Mulligan are just like they're so good. And like even like Mom Jeans
Yeah.
and like the Front Bottoms, and that's like a more of a different style. And that those bands are a little bit older, but these bands doing it, it's just like the scene is just thriving so much right now. And you're gonna have the bad stuff and the posers are the ones that are trying to capture the 2000 sound, and you're gonna have the bad, but we had those back then too.
Mhm.
Here's
Yeah.
the thing, like
Yes.
time we forget about all of the bad bands that were out there that we saw, that because they don't
Yeah.
hold up. And then you look back in time with Rose Tinted Glasses and you go, oh yeah, music was so great because you had My Chemical Romance and you had the Used and you had all these bands, but like you don't remember the thousands of horrible bands that were also playing Warped Tour that you were like, fuck these guys.
Yeah, oh my god, I can think of a couple myself that I'm not gonna name names,
Yeah,
but
not to
yes,
badmouth
right,
anybody, but I think that's just the reality. There's always
yeah,
going to be the good and the bad with each generation of music. And I think that the good right now are just as good, if not better, than the good at that time, because they're just like, it's just so different and nuanced. And yeah,
yeah, oh,
the scene's alive.
oh my gosh, could talk at the scene all day.
In what ways do you feel content creators struggle with mental health?
I think there's a lot of pressure on content creators to keep up with trends and algorithms and posting every single day and all of these things. Like there's just like a lot of pressure, and I think that can take a toll on someone's mental health even when, oh okay, cool, like I put a lot of work into this post and I'm going to post it and then it just doesn't perform well and you're like,
Mhm,
Oh,
what the heck, so I think that it's very easy to take a toll on your mental health when you do something like that, right? Especially as a creator, when like the validation kind of is in the likes and the comments and the shares and all of and the views, and like there is validation in it and you work so hard and that's the result that you want, and then when you don't get it, you're like, you almost take it personally and you're like, is this shit, am I shit, and
mhm,
I think for myself personally, I've gone through this my entire life for the last 13 years working as a radio host, where like you have a boss that's basically going through this with you and you're looking back and constantly reviewing your work and trying to get better. So for me, it's a little bit easier now for it to just bounce off and my skin's a lot thicker where it's like, oh, this didn't perform well. Well, fuck. And then
mhm,
it bounces off a lot easier. Whereas if I didn't have the experiences that I've had working in a creative industry that has been so competitive and gruesome, um, that it would be a little bit harder on me and my mental health for sure.
no, it totally, and I mean, obviously, you have a way bigger following than we do, but I even think about me when I'll work on something, I'm like, "Oh, this is really cool." Like, this is, and again, it's for me, it's not just about the views and clicks, but it is almost that, okay, well, if they view it, they're gonna maybe come to the podcast, and there was that, "Oh, wait, they're liking it and viewing it, but I don't really see them coming over." Like, they like what I did, this little 10-second whatever thing I made, but a lot of times it's like, it's a weird, I can't imagine on a bigger scale, or and even having, some of the keyboard warriors in the comments too, right? They always have something, whether they love it or hate it, and balancing that, I don't know. It's hard enough if someone gives you like a bad rating on anything, and then you see some keyboard warrior on whatever you created and you worked really hard on, and you're someone that does work really hard on that stuff. I mean, you see your content and I I love it. I love what you're doing.
Thank you. That means the world to me. And hearing people say that, like, that's where I get my, I guess, validity.
Mhm.
And, that is the rewarding part of it all is having people tell me that I'm connecting with them in some sort of way, or they love my content, or
Yeah.
they found a band. Like, those are the things that make it rewarding. I think, like you said before, like, you put so much work into it. And I know that there's so many creators and podcasters and musicians that put so much time and energy into their stuff, and they can take it a little bit harder than someone like myself. Like those keyboard warriors don't bother me in the slightest. I've heard whatever you can think of writing on as a comment on one of my posts, I've probably heard 10 times worse.
Yeah.
So like for me, it can just kind of roll off for the most part. Don't get me wrong, there's an exception to every rule, and every now and then something will sting a little, but I think I'm better than most at letting it fly off. But like hearing you say that, like a part of me kind of gets into my own head about like a part of me kind of wants to help out other people because that's like my nature. And I'm like, should I start making some content where I'm like trying to help out other people and like doing advice posts? But then I also get in my own head and I'm like, I don't want to be like that, influencer coach, because that's not what I want to do, but I do
Yeah.
want to help people. If people did want to pay me to be a coach on content create, like I'm open to it, but like I just don't want to come like you. I think we all worry about how we come across, because at the end of the day, like I would love to work with people and take the time to work with people and help them get better at what they're doing, and I'm not gatekeeping anything and doing all those things. But I also like worry a little bit about perception because I'm human, and I think we all do. And I think the biggest hurdle for most of us, and I'm not excluded from that, right? Like I'm admitting right now that I feel this way and I think about these things, but I do think for the most part we need to feel like as creators that it's okay to be cringe and almost embrace that cringe. And that was the moment where I started popping off, where I was just kind of
Mhm.
like, I make a video and be like, is this cringe? And I remember going to a producer in our production studio at the radio station I was working for at the time, being like, is this video too cringe? Like, tell me. Like, if it is
Yeah.
too cringe, I'm not going to post it. I would rather you tell me. And she's like, no, I think it's fine. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. And I posted it, and that video ended up getting like 1.7 million views.
Wow.
And I was like, cool. Like, I thought that this might be too cringy and I was scared of posting it. And that was one of the first few videos that really started popping off. So it's getting over yourself a little bit. And just being able to kind of shed a lot of it off is a big part of being a creator, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, I was just talking to someone today too about, like there was the upset factor of whatever creative you are, whether it's a podcast or content creation or whatever you're doing, that maybe you don't get likes or your friends don't share it, right? And I said, it's for me at least doing this, I had to learn my audience is not going to be probably people that I know or family member, and getting out of that mindset and understanding that your audience will find you. Like you've clearly have found your audience. And I mean, it's with us, with other people I know that love you. And I think that's what's also important too as a creative, that I had to learn that, you know what, the right audience will find you, and just be yourself. And again, even if you think it's cringe or whatever, someone else is going to be like you and love that and resonate with that. And there's so many things that we've put out there. Like an episode, I thought, oh, I don't know, like if anyone will like this, but you know what? I really want to. And those are the ones that people resonate with the most. So
And you know what? You want to know a little secret about content creation
yeah.
and being successful within it? The people that support you the most aren't the people you know.
Yes.
They're the strangers. And I
Yeah.
think that goes for anything. I think that goes
Yeah.
for content creation. I think that goes for business. I think I get more support from people that I've never met than I do from people that I know.
Yes. Oh, 1,000%. Justine and I were talking about that the other day. I'm like, there's people that I've never met that are in my DMs. Like, oh, I listened to this, or I
Yes.
told my friend there was this silly Fall Out Boy episode we did in the beginning of the podcast. And when I go back and listen to it, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I, I thought it was a little cringe now looking back at it, but it was just getting this podcast up and running. And I loved Fall Out Boy. They had a new record and I wanted to do it. And it's like, wow, like that thing that I thought maybe, I don't know, I didn't think was that good. There's people that are like, I appreciated that. I appreciated the enthusiasm of Fall Out Boy. And I think, and again, they're total people I don't know. Somehow they found it, whatever it is. And it's people that your audience will always find you. I just have that feeling. And I tell people all the time, because if you're passionate and you're you, the right people will follow you.
The cool thing is too is I've had people find me that knew me back in the 2000s that I
Hmm.
totally forgot about, that like, like I met a couple of times or went to a couple of concerts with, and they're like, or throughout my career I met a couple of people and we lost touch and they're like, "Oh my God, what are you doing on my For You page?"
Yeah.
You know? And so it's really cool like reconnecting with those old people too. Like I had one person message me going, I know you from somewhere, but I don't know where. And they're like, did we hang out or go to any concerts or do anything back like when we were kids? And I was looking at this one person's name, and they have a very unique name. So it stood out. And I only know one person from when I was a teenager with this name. And I'm like, pretty sure we went to like the local theme park near my house when we were kids. Like we hung out with my cousin. she's like, oh yeah, I remember we went to Wakestock and we would go to Wonderland and we would do all of these things. And she sent me a picture that she had, and this meant the world to me because it was a picture of me, her, this woman I hadn't seen in, 15 years, and my cousin who's no longer with us. And my
Mhm.
cousin and I, like, we were best friends in that era. We went to every single emo show together. It was just, we were inseparable. So the fact that, like, and I lost so many pictures of the two of us, especially through that era. I think, like most of us, we lost a lot of our MySpace pictures, right?
Mhm. Oh,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
So I lost so many of my MySpace pictures, and most of them were me and my cousin Cassie. And so, like, the fact that I got that one extra grainy flip phone picture of me and Cassie was just like, it meant the world to me. So I think that's also really cool. Like, there's just so many cool things that kind of come from doing this and reconnecting with your past and the things that you've done, right?
We just appreciate you coming on today. This has been so great. Like, I told Justine, I was like, "This is gonna be one of my favorite ones," and it, like, literally is. But I mean, just to kind of close it out for you, is there anything I know, we're in 2024. What are you looking forward to with this year and our space? Where would you like to see it go maybe?
Okay, on a personal
Mhm.
level, I'm getting
Mhm.
married this year, so that's what I'm looking forward to the
Oh,
most. Uh
absolutely, absolutely.
and then on a professional level with Ourspace, I really want to be able to sort of manage both bigger interviews, and I would like to book some bigger artists and start booking some bands and some artists that I grew up listening to. I think that's been a goal from the start. And so to be able to reach out to some bigger artists would be really cool because I think that that would also be able to bring more people into the podcast. And then I kind of want to work with much smaller artists too. So like I kind of want that both because of my love of music and sharing that and helping out people, and that's just sort of that's what I love doing. So I want to start getting more of those artists that are, under 20,000
Mhm.
Spotify streams and bringing them on the show and exposing them to a larger audience as well. So kind of like doing and managing both, spreading new music to new people and also reminiscing and being able to interview bigger artists. So I think that's my goal is kind of on both ends and helping out more people because we don't have any of this if it's not for other people, right? So I'm that type of person where I'm a team player and I love seeing other people win just as much as I love winning. So
Mhm. Oh,
those are my goals for our space.
yes, 100, like, that's even us, like, I've loved how our podcast in the beginning, of course, you have those names, right, where you're like, "I would love," and of course, but I love how our podcast has kind of evolved into that where for some reason, Pittsburgh loves us. We've been just all the bands
Oh,
I've
yeah.
found, and they're like, "Oh, well, we're part of that scene too," or "We listen to that." We've like 2 Pittsburgh bands this week coming up, and I think that's what's so cool about that too, and just a podcast in general. Like, there's people that are under even 6,000 that are like, "Oh, we're not really sure if you'd want us." I said, "Absolutely, you have a story. Like, music has made an impact in your life." And I think I love that in helping those smaller bands where someone will hear a band and they're like, "Oh, yeah, I heard them. I listened to your podcast, and now I'm listening to one of our artists, Walwyn, that was on, and they loved him." And I said, I would have never again, yes, that's where we led, but, and I hope the best for you with yours because you definitely deserve that, and I love your show, and
That means the world to me, and I love your show. The two of
thank
you work
you.
so hard, and you're putting together great content and a great podcast. And I really look forward to seeing how stereotherapy continues to grow.
And all right, guys, that was our conversation with Matt Vettese. We can't thank Matt enough again for taking time with us, and we really enjoyed getting to know him beyond his content. I'll have all the links below for his podcast because I truly think he has something so cool going on over there, and I truly listen to it every week. I would not lie to you guys. I think it's great. Please go check out his podcast if you haven't already. As for Justine and I, you will see us next week. We will not just have one, but we're going to have 2 episodes to coincide with a guest release they have on the 12th. So you guys will go ahead and you will hear, no matter when you're listening to this, right? But you will have 2 brand new episodes. I cannot wait to share those conversations. They're one of my favorites as well. So I hope you enjoy that. But I hope you guys are continuing to listen to awesome music. We have a lot of stuff on the way. And as for Justine and I, we will see you guys next week. New episodes every Tuesday, bright and early. All right, guys, have a great week. Bye, guys.